Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm getting joined again with one of my friends, Roberta, and we're talking about a part two to our first part series around women's health and hormones and what we can actually do to help support our body as women. Because, as we know, this kind of research is still getting talked about. There's still a lot going on that we just don't know or we might not have been purview to before. So, wanting to update you around myths, around what's true versus what's false, and also around what we can actually do with real resources to help support our bodies as women. And so, if you haven't met me yet, my name is Erica. I am a nurse. I'm a health coach, an NLP therapist, a Reiki therapist, and an essential oil lover. And I work with women between ages of 30 to 60 to really optimize their health and wellness and to create them easy steps to achieve that. And so Roberta just joined us. Hi, Roberta. How are you this
I'm
morning?
good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sitting outside, which I can't complain about because this morning it is hot in New York City, but it is not terrible yet. So we're in the
Uh,
shade.
well, if you were in my apartment where the master air conditioning broke, you
Oh
would be hot.
no.
And
Oh gosh.
yeah, I should have gone out as well. It's really hot. So if you hear a fan in the background, that's what it is. Sorry
Um,
about that.
no worries. You got to keep yourself cool. It's like in the 90s here. It hit 100 yesterday. I was like,
Yes, I know.
geez.
I know. I felt it here. It's been out for, it's the master unit, so it controls all the buildings. And for whatever reason, they're waiting for the parts and they just haven't gotten them yet. So it's hot.
Oh gosh. Well, yeah, keep that fan going. But if you want to introduce yourself too, that would be so helpful before we sort of get started.
Okay, so my name's Roberta Morris, and I have Roberta M, Women Redefining Midlife. I work with women who are going through, mostly through the menopause transition. I address all issues actually, but I concentrate on what I call the four pillars of wellness, which would be sleep and nutrition, physical activity, which covers an awful lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be exercise because not everybody likes to, and stress management. And I will work individually, but I prefer group support because I think that's the most important thing because you get to share and understand that there are other people going through the same thing that you're going through. And you get to ask questions to a group because not everybody has the same experience, so you get to share your experiences that way.
Yeah, no, group can always be super helpful, especially when we talk about such big topics like hormones and women's health and things like that. So,
Exactly, exactly. And that remains a mystery.
yeah, it's as I said, it's kind of the start of us exploring this as a society, I think a bit more. So it's nice that we get to have these moments to like talk and give people actual knowledge. There's a lot of information out there, especially on the internet, that I'm like, oh no, wait, no, don't listen to that. Um, and it gets confusing. And I think, it's hard to know because I always get questions, and I don't know if this is true for you too, but I, tons of my clients come up and they go, Erica, like, what do you think about like this supplement or this supplement? And I'm like, where did you hear from this? And they're like, someone was trying to like sell it. I was like, if they're trying to sell it, most likely we got to do a little bit more digging to see if it actually is helpful.
You need to do your homework. If you can't get it from a reliable source, you need to do your own search. But you need to find reliable resources.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very important because as you said, there are a lot of misinformation guides and things like that out there. So you need to be careful.
Yeah. And so I guess with that note, let's start with like going over some of these like common myths that we hear in our practice and sort of what actual truth
Yes,
is around them.
yes. Okay.
Yeah. I'd say the first one that I always hear from like thinking about women as a whole, like where our um sort of journey begins is really in puberty. And I feel like when we start to go through puberty, we start to learn about the pill, we start to learn about birth control. I mean, nowadays there's like tons of birth control. There's ones in your arm, there's rings, there's, the there's obviously the pill, there's IUDs, there's just so many different forms out there now, and they all have like benefits and drawbacks specifically. But I think the interesting thing that I used to learn about everything when it came to puberty is that, your body is sort of like fertile every day of the month. And it was like, don't just be aware, like, you can get pregnant very easily. And we're kind of seeing that that's much more false, specifically if you've been on birth control for a long time. Like I know so many women now that are having hard time getting pregnant because of the use of birth control because they didn't quite understand what birth control is actually doing to their body.
I don't think the doctors, or many of the doctors, I shouldn't say all, really take the time to explain it to you. And I'm not even
Yeah.
sure that all of them understand what it's about. Especially, I hate to say this, if you're a male, because you just don't really understand what the female anatomy is about, what a female is actually going through. So, yeah, you're right about that, about being fertile and getting pregnant and what have you.
And it impacts your hormones and it can impact
Yeah.
your hormones throughout your entire life. And I think
Yes.
that is the part that is really missing. Like I think when you're a kid or when you're a young adult and like you're going through the decision of getting on birth control, which again, everyone has their own need for it. And I don't think that birth control needs to be outlawed. I'm like actually really proud of women to have the ability to get birth control because that has been
Mm-hmm.
a right and a fight that
Mm-hmm.
we've been having for a long
Mm-hmm.
time. But it's just to get knowledge around like what it's actually doing so that way you can make the informed decision like, is this a good decision for my body right now? Do I want to take part in a different option to, take a little more time to track my cycles, to understand because there's so many apps out there like Natural Cycles where they can test your basal body temperature and they can be pretty accurate with that, as well as like knowing that birth control is actually changing your levels of estrogen and progesterone in your body, which, as we talked about in part one,
Mm-hmm.
affects things like your mood, your bone density, your weight fluctuation, like your mind, your brain fog, all that kind of stuff is all related to how you feel each day. And that can actually be why people, they always talk about like the trial pill or the trial birth control to see how you know, work on it because it's really it's changing your hormones, which is just changing your brain chemistry.
Well, yeah, and we need to take that into account because there are so many different factors that are involved, so many different parts of your body that can be affected. Sex hormones are not just affecting you sexually, it affects your entire body. Everything is connected, everything is interconnected. So you can't just say that I'm taking this and all it'll affect is my sexual needs, my sexual desires, my ability to get pregnant, not get pregnant. It affects everything.
Yeah. And I think the next big part when we think about women's health that everyone was going to go through, because I know we could talk about pregnancy and fertility and all that kind of stuff, but
Right,
that's not an experience that every woman is going to go through who have ovaries and,
right, right.
so the other big part is perimenopause, menopause. And so that also is riddled with, this like misinformation out there, like just lack of not even it's lack of understanding.
Well, we've never really taken the time to fully understand the woman's body, woman's anatomy, and that's very much why women now still carry around all of these false ideas or misinformation because you grow up hearing certain myths and you think it's true because you hear it from your mother, you hear it from your grandmother, you hear it from other relatives and friends. And how could all of that be wrong when they're saying it? And a lot of times it is. I know when I was a kid, my mother made up names for different body parts because she couldn't use the actual words. And I didn't know better until I actually met friends who knew. We
Yeah.
were all a bunch of young teenagers starting to go through getting our periods and whatever. And we, we learned from one another during that time. And now it's time to learn about perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause.
Yeah. And I think that that is something that is interesting that is happening now, at least what I've seen in my own personal wave of
Mm-hmm.
friends and things that are starting to have kids, is that they're teaching young girls, you have ovaries, you have a vagina, you have like the
So
boys have
important.
penises, like and like telling
So
people
important.
exactly what the name is because it it A makes you understand your body, and B, as you said, like everyone is always going to seek the information out. So they could be learning wrong things from their friends or from their peers if you as a parent or you as, some sort of caregiver um,
Hmm.
are unable to have those conversations about this is what this looks like, this is what this means, and have some sort of like level of teaching because kids will
Yes.
just like the
Yes.
lies that I heard as a kid, like now thinking back, I'm like, oh my God, I was so silly. But it's because I didn't know any better. And, people they'll just continue to seek them out.
Right. Right. And if you ask your family or your friends who have the wrong information, they're going to tell you it's correct because this is what they know.
Yeah.
And you have to be very careful. You have to understand that it may not be correct. And it goes from childhood through puberty through the menopausal stages, um, because all of that misinformation has been carried on over and over through all of those different stages for all of these years and all of these generations. So we have to be careful, and we really need to get the correct information out there. That's why education is so important. And not just education for the woman who's going through the perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, but also the people who put the information out there, even some doctor's offices, they may not have all the correct information.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. I mean,
Yeah.
the biggest one that I talk to my clients about is the onset of perimenopause. I think, people always assume that it's in your 50s or, closer to 60s, and that's like when perimenopause can start. But there's more and more research about women who are trying to go for their second kid in their late 30s,
Hmm.
and for, you know, unbeknownst to them, are they're experiencing menopause or perimenopause. And they're like, shocked because it can start as early as like your late 30s. And I don't
Yeah.
think a lot of people know that.
Yeah. And what about if you have a cancer, or
Yeah.
and you've breast cancer, ovarian cancer, any of those that can throw you into, because of the treatments, that can throw you into an early menopause. And how many women are actually aware of that or understand that if they've had these things done to them, if they've had these procedures, and their bodies are acting differently, and why they have all these symptoms and they don't know why. They think they're too young to be going through any form of menopause, but they're not, unfortunately, not when you've had these complications and treatments.
Yeah. And women are getting, adding to this is like hysterectomies. People
Yes.
do get
Yes.
that. And that doesn't even put you into perimenopause. That snaps into menopause. You are done.
Yes. Yes. I've had many friends who've asked me about that because they've had breast cancer, and they were thrown into menopause very early on and
Yeah.
couldn't understand what they were going through.
Yeah. It's because it's kind of like, as we said in the first part, is that
Hmm.
perimenopause and menopause are kind of like the rebirth of puberty. And I don't know if you remember, like, I feel like someone's going through puberty, they're like, what is going on? I feel crazy. I feel, out of
Hmm.
whack
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's your hormones are just fluctuating, and our hormones, unfortunately or fortunately, guide our behavior and guide our emotions, guide our feelings, guide the way our body runs. And so, are hugely impactful to our day to day. And I think that disconnect sometimes can make you, once you kind of understand that, it makes you appreciate the fact that, it's not just something that I'm doing wrong. It's not something
Hmm.
that it's a lot less blame, and can kind of take the action of like, okay, now that it's the hormones, let me do something about the hormones.
Right. Right.
And I think the other big thing that I always talk about, and I know we've talked about a lot about this, is the different um, symptoms of perimenopause. Because I think most people think about like hot flashes or, I'm trying to think of the other like huge one that I keep coming. I don't know why my brain is going blank, but hot flashes is like usually that one, and sleep disturbances. So like all of my clients that are dealing with perimenopause, those are like the two big things, and weight gain. And they're like, well, this is just normal. Everyone experiences that.
Right.
And that's so
Right.
wrong.
Right. Well, a lot of women think that if they're going through perimenopause, that they can no longer get pregnant. And that's
Yes.
not true. I mean, there are a lot of myths out there. Yes, the symptoms, you're absolutely right. Night sweats and hot flashes are the number one complaint
Yeah, I think
because,
75% of women or something like that
yeah,
get it.
yeah. I was very fortunate. I did not have a tough time with hot flashes or night sweats. I can count on maybe one or two hands over the years how many times I've had that experience. So I was very fortunate in that respect. But the few that I had were very uncomfortable. And I had a friend who walked around with a fan for years because
I
she would
love
just
that.
yeah, she just got so hot. She couldn't take it. So she whipped out that little fan and put it on and cooled down.
Yeah. And I think the crazy thing is that there are like over 40 symptoms of perimenopause.
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah.
way more than just that. And I think the ones that women forget about are like a lot to do with the brain too, like memory loss,
Hmm.
brain fog. You can't really recall things very easily. You feel very low and drained all the time, very sleepy. Like those things are also really important to note. And I mean, I don't, have to go through all 40 of them, but um, those are really important to note too, because if you're experiencing them, doctors might not associate that to perimenopause. So you kind of have to start because you know your body best. So like if you're starting to feel this way, you're going to be the first one to clock it and be like, "Oh, maybe I should go get my hormones tested. Maybe I should advocate for myself to get, to go through the process of like testing for perimenopause, which can be symptom driven, but it also can be, you can get a lot of information from blood tests. They are a point in time,
Hmm.
which is very challenging, and not a lot of doctors understand how to read it, but there are other more advanced tests out there in functional medicine world to kind of like the Dutch test to kind of help navigate that if that is something that you choose to do, but also just noting like, oh, there might be a change. Let me continue to like mark in my journal all the different symptoms that maybe are coming up for me now.
Well, yeah. What about vaginal dryness? That's a very big one as well.
Yes.
How many women think that because they are going through this, then their sex lives are over? And that's not
Yeah.
true. There are ways, just lubricants, for instance. There are ways to be able to help yourself so that you can enjoy your sex life as you're getting older and going through these different stages.
Yeah.
Many women think that because they're going through menopause, that's it. They're done. Their lives are over as the way that they've known it. But that's not true. Your reproductive years may be over, but your productive years are not. You can change things. You can make yourself happy. You can redefine yourself. That's why um, I call my group redefining midlife because you can redefine midlife.
Yeah.
Chinese have a very good expression. They think of it as a second spring, a new life, a new beginning. So, just because you're going through menopause does not mean that this is the end all to everything.
Yeah. No. And I think the other important on that note to like talk about is that people also think that there's nothing that they can do, right? Like there's no, like it's really hard to feel like, okay, like this is just going to happen to me. I have no control over it. But that also is a myth because everything that you do leading up to menopause, starting in your early 30s, can actually impact the way that you experience perimenopause and menopause because it's your diet, it's your lifestyle, it's
Hmm. Hmm.
your relationships, it's your joy, it's all of these holistic
Right.
viewpoints,
Right.
your sleep,
Right.
and all of
Right.
that
Right.
will impact how you're actually going to
Yes.
go through menopause. So you can
Yes.
actually take a really active role so much earlier on to
And
help
it
yourself.
And it's never too late to change. Even if
No.
you're past menopause and you're into postmenopause, it's never too late to change. You can help yourself, your well being, by making certain changes, healthy lifestyle changes. I
Yeah.
mean, we now know that just by making certain changes, healthy lifestyle changes, we can help ourselves in terms of controlling Alzheimer's, should that be an issue, or any kind of dementia, should those be an issue, cardiovascular disease, so many other things that can all be affected by making healthy lifestyle changes. So don't think that because you're going through menopause, it's over. It's not. It's
Yeah.
not.
And
Redefine
it's,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah. And it's also interesting that, like, if you think about just like the change in a body too. Like it might just be that what you were doing is no longer working. Like
Right.
HIIT workouts might not be it for you
Right.
anymore. And that's okay.
Right.
We can do more strength training and more like toning,
Right.
like
Right.
or more
Absolutely.
weight bearing exercises because actually those at this stage of your life and go like starting in your 30s going through your late 80s, weight bearing exercise and mobility is actually what's going to be what helps you to ensure longevity because you need strong bones which decrease as you lose estrogen and progesterone, and you need yeah.
Probably.
And so like you need to start now though because you
Yeah.
need to build the
Yeah.
muscle.
Yeah.
If you don't build it, your body has nothing to go from. So
Yes.
you have to sort of start in your 30s and build
Yes.
it as you get going. And it
Yes.
might change a bit. You might not be able to like lift as heavy as you did in your 30s, but that's also fine because your body's just a little bit different now.
I read a lot of articles lately, or I have been reading a lot of articles lately about women who really weren't physically active in their earlier lives, but now that they're going through menopause, or even one woman in particular, I think she's from Canada, she was in her late 60s. Her daughter was a physical trainer and encouraged her to start doing these things. And now they show pictures before and after. She looks wonderful. She's in her
Yeah.
70s now, and she looks wonderful. So again, it's never too late. It's never too late to feel good about yourself in so many different ways.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing, as you mentioned, with nutrition too, because I think nutrition is a big part of all of this. And,
Yeah, yeah,
trying to eat a very diverse, I would say, whole foods, as in like trying to be as low processed food as possible. Um, but, like all of that will also help, create a healthy base for your body to move forward. And I always hear the myth when around weight gain. And it's not something specific to menopause, it's just like weight gain in general that everyone's like, calories in, calories out. I just have to eat less. And it's like, no, 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 no. We don't eat less. We actually need to just redefine how we're thinking about nutrition. We need to prioritize
right,
proteins. We need to
right,
prioritize
right.
vegetables. We need to prioritize, you know, making sure that our
Fiber.
fats, like, and fiber, and making
Yeah,
sure our
yeah,
body is just
yeah.
fueled in a
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
supportive way.
But part of the problem is that we often just grab things because we're on the run. We don't have time to sit down and eat a proper meal. But if we would take the time to be mindful about what we're eating and pay
Yeah.
attention to our cues, am I hungry? Do I like this? Can I take the time? Should I turn off the phone, the TV, the radio, whatever external the distractions there may be? We have to learn to be mindful of what we're doing. Or another way is intuitive eating. They're more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that would help. I mean, it would even help in terms of weight gain, because if you pay attention and you say, "Gee, I think I'm full now. I don't need to finish what's on my plate," you will lose some weight.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
And I always talk to clients about the idea of getting rid of some biases from their childhood around certain types of food because there are a lot of, rooted issues in food a lot of times that people just haven't really surfaced. A lot of that's around fat and carbs, to be honest with you, and the misunderstandings with them, which is a totally other topic that I'm not going to
right,
get into. But
right.
it's also just taking time to understand, is there a bias? Is there something that I am feeling towards these foods emotionally, or am I using it as some sort of emotional support because it's
Well,
actually helping me avoid something negative? Like
that,
associating like that too is also such a hard challenge. And when you're feeling emotionally ain't not in control, it's the perfect opportunity for you to
yes,
be like, all
yes.
right, like, where's my emotional support chocolate?
Yeah, how many times do we soothe ourselves because by grabbing whatever, potato chips, chocolate, whatever it is, ice cream. Ice cream would be my favorite.
Mine
Um,
too.
whatever it is that has satisfied us in the past, we tend to keep going back to, and we have to be aware of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Just be conscious of what you're doing, and that will at least start the process.
Yeah. And stress is a big part when you go through,
Terrible.
every stage of life, but
Yes.
specifically when, you're dealing with hormone shifts, because I always like to explain it that all of our hormones in our body, like our sex hormones, our thyroid, our vitamin D, they're all sort of best friends in a way. But as
Hmm.
soon as they like decide to, get a little change a little bit, everyone kind of freaks out and gets angry. And so they all sort of move. So they're so interconnected that if you raise your cortisol, your stress hormone, in every stage of your life, then all the rest of your hormones are going to consistently not be able to recalibrate and balance themselves out because
Hmm.
this guy is so, throwing the whole team off, throwing the whole friend group off. And so like simple things like, you know, doing deep breaths, like I always do the 4-7-8 breath, or
Right. Right.
trying to figure out how to, find moments where you can kind of decrease and go into more of a parasympathetic mode. Legs in the wall is something that I also say, like, go stick your legs out, like, lay on your back, put your legs in the wall
You
for
did
five
a reel
minutes.
on that, didn't you?
Yes.
I saw it.
Yes. It's incredible. But it's like
Yes.
so easy. You're like, all right, I can do that for 5 minutes. You can watch TV when you're doing it. Like, who cares? Like,
Yes.
just do it because
I
it's
thought
it's
that was,
going to help your mind shift and your body shift and your lymph shift, and it's going to rebalance your hormones out. Like there's simple things. Like, and I think that's the thing that that I would encourage people to remember is that you don't have to go through this like meditation intensive. You don't need to do all of these things that feel very overwhelming. You can do 4 or 5 simple things throughout your day, and in 2 weeks you're going to see a difference.
yes. I mean, if you don't really want to or like to sit down and just meditate, because many people don't, just clearing your head, going outside for a walk,
Going
can
outside and sitting out there.
sitting outside. Yes, I mean, a change of environment will do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love to walk,
me
and
too.
I find it very soothing and calming for me. So that's what I like to do.
Yeah,
I meditate, but I'm more apt to take a walk. Even journaling. Oh
yeah,
my God, the journaling for me is really good. I like it, but that's important because you're. Oh, I read articles about, well, you should just keep it positive. List the first three things that happened to you the day before that were positive, and forget about the negative. I don't necessarily find that soothing to me. I like to make sure that I acknowledge the positive things. Somebody was nice to me, they held the door, they held the elevator, helped me with a package, something like that. But I also like to write down the things that were bothering me because I like to get it out of my mind and put it
yeah,
behind me. Yeah, so
yeah,
I find journaling very helpful.
yeah. Me too. I actually phrase it. It's very similar to you. Is I phrase it as like, what would I like to have done better, or what would I have liked to have
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
done better today? Because again, it's not, you know, to me that shifts my mind of like, okay, like, it might not have been perfect, and that's okay, and it might not have, something negative what might have happened, but again, if you like, it's the way of acknowledging that without putting a negative framing on it, because our brains do want to stay in the positive momentum
Right,
for
right,
us to continue
right,
forward. So like that's how I always do it. I always say it's like things that I'm grateful for, and then things that I would like to let go of, or things that I
right,
would like to have done better.
right. Yeah, well, that's a very good way. I don't really look at it that way, but that's a very good way to do it. I never really thought about that before. I just like to write down what's bothering me, um, because I just find that sometimes I get very overwhelmed, and if I write it down, I can put it behind me.
It's brain dump. It takes it literally like it takes it
Exactly,
from your brain
exactly. Yeah,
into a piece of paper. And like
yeah.
the reason why anyways, we can digress in this for a hot second. The reason why our brain like holds on to it is because it wants you to, it's usually it's protective for you to like remember things or like want to do things, but really it's the intention of it is being protective. But what it's actually doing is creating more internal stress for us. Like emotions should only be 90 seconds, but we let them, take our entire lives up because we're always like turning and churning it in our brain and going over and over and over again. So what you're doing is essentially like letting the 90 seconds stop. You're
Right,
like, here's the emotion,
right,
I'm going to put it
right,
down, now we're done.
right. Exactly.
And before we like end, because I know we're like kind of going to wrap things up soon, I really want
Right.
to talk about HRT because I feel like that's something that we didn't
Yeah.
hit on, and
Yeah.
it's so, so big in a
Yes.
myth space.
Yes. I grew up at a time, or I started going through menopause at a time when HRT was kind of frowned upon because of certain tests, research that was done and the results. But it turns out that it may have happened. There may have been some negative results, but it was very minor. It was not statistically significant results. And if I was to do it all over again, I would definitely consider HRT. I would try to find out what the pros and the cons would be for me personally, not
Yeah.
and make the right decision. But I would definitely consider it.
Yeah. I mean, to like kind of bring people up to speed that do not know it, HRT essentially was banned, not banned, but looked down upon
Right,
because of
right,
a 2002 study by the WHO, and essentially said it links to breast cancer. And since then,
right.
our drugs have changed, which is a big important part. Like the drugs that they used then versus the drugs that we have on the market now are totally different. And the studies that are coming up from the HRT drugs nowadays is actually very beneficial or could be very beneficial depending upon the person that you are
Right.
and depending upon your specific case.
Okay, one thing,
Yeah.
HRT is hormone replacement therapy for anyone out there
Yes.
who may not know. It just dawned on me.
Yes. And
Yeah,
that's, yeah. As I
yeah.
say, we always use acronyms, and I'm always like, oh, right. I have to remind them that not everyone's in my brain. Um, but yeah, and then I think the interesting thing nowadays is that it also comes in so many different forms. There and like
Mm-hmm,
more local HRT versus systemic HRT. Like
mm-hmm.
there's so many different forms, from a pill to gel to a suppository to a patch, and
Patch, yes.
each of them have their own benefits, drawbacks. Each for each person, it can be, a benefit drawback, as you said, like pro and con. But the biggest thing that I think, which is why I suggest most women just start to like learn a little bit more about it, have a conversation. Hopefully, your doctor will understand. If not, find a new one. Is that if you're going through perimenopause, if you take HRT at a certain window, it's usually like I would say, I think it's like 45 to 55 is kind of the window of like ideal, is what a lot
Mm-hmm,
of research shows.
mm-hmm.
If you take it then, it can actually help save things like your cardiovascular health later on, your bone density health. Like it can actually have a lot of benefits to you. And you can technically start it later or earlier, depending upon your particular case, and it could have some benefits. But there is that optimal window. So, like,
Right,
if you are
right,
considering it, or if you want to learn more about it, or if you're having
right,
really bad symptoms of
right,
perimenopause, that's the time to have the conversation with a doctor, and a doctor that's listening to you. That's
right,
the key.
right. Yes, listening to you and is knowledgeable. They
Yes.
have to be able to give you the correct information, and the people who work in their office need to have the correct information as well, because oftentimes you may forget to ask your doctor something. And by the way, what happens if? And if they don't know, they volunteer information. It's incorrect. You're walking out with the wrong information. And if they don't know, they would say, "Let me find out." But that doesn't always happen.
They're busy. Insurance doesn't really always let us, as healthcare
Yeah,
professionals
yeah,
who was in the field, like,
yeah.
insurance doesn't really always give us the time to really sit there and be able to have those conversations. You only are allowed it, but 15, 20 minutes per
Yeah.
PCP, primary care visit. Sorry, I was about
Mm.
to do another acronym. A primary care visit. And, some of that's taken up by getting labs and your nurse and, triaging. And so really you're like 8 minutes with a patient, which is
Nothing.
scary.
It's
Nothing.
very scary. Very scary.
We,
Yeah.
you know, it we talked for 30 minutes, and I feel like now is how people are actually getting information. Like it takes time. It takes time to understand, which is why I think the work that you and I do for women is so important, because we're able to take that time to actually understand where you are in life, what your symptoms are, what your day-to-day looks like, because and your history, like every woman's daily life is different. Everyone's stress is different. Everyone's, push and pull of responsibilities is different, and so you need an individualized plan. One blanket like here's your guide to menopause, or here's your guide to fertility, or here's your guide to puberty doesn't work.
No, you're right. No, you're your, as you said before, you're your own best advocate. You need to uh, do the legwork, so to speak, before you even go in to visit your healthcare practitioner, um, because you know what's going on in your body best.
Yeah.
So,
And and that's something that like I like to help clients with too, is like, and I'm sure you do too, is like, okay, like here are the questions that, we should ask or you should ask during your upcoming visit. I always encourage people to have a list, like, and we can create it together because while I'm not a provider, I do know a lot about this topic. I do have a history of being in the nursing space, so I do understand what providers will listen to and what they'll catch up on or their ears will perk up on. So like having a list, coming prepared,
mm-hmm,
yes, do your own research, but there's
mm-hmm.
also people like us. There's also people that are doing other sorts of work and articles out there that you don't have to feel like you're alone in this.
Right, right. No, that's very important because if you can share your experience or share your knowledge, you're ahead of the game. You know that you're not alone. You know that there are things that are common to all, if most, if not all, women going through
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and then to end, I guess the biggest thing we can, or like I would say, for women, or my desire is to start to tune in, start to listen to your body, start to understand where you would like to make changes. Because honestly, most of us intuitively know where we need to make changes if we listen hard enough.
Yes.
So um, that would be my biggest takeaway is,
Yeah.
start just start to listen, start to look at it. And if you feel like you want support, like Roberta and I are two people that are more than capable to sort of help you get started and help you to actually maybe ask the right questions to tune in, because that also can be a skill and a tool that you need to learn, because not we don't know that anymore. We've lost that.
Yes. And yes, education is very important. Um, you just need to understand what the issues are and what you're going through. And what better way, if you can't find it on your own, as you said, Erica and I are very capable and happy to help people, help women, put the education out there. It's not just on a friend by friend thing. It's all over. I mean, even in your work environment, you may not get the
Yeah.
support that you need. So yes, I agree with you. The big takeaway is for you to be supportive of yourself. Be your own advocate.
Prioritize you.
Yes.
Um, but on that note, Roberta, how do people get in touch with you?
Okay. So I am robertam.com, or you can get in touch with me at robertam.com.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously on Instagram too. If you
Yes.
cold DM her, she will she'll respond, I promise.
And to get in touch with you.
I am Health E by Erica, and that is my website. And that is also my email, healthy by Erica at gmail.com or healthy by Erica.com. And I'm Healthy Wellness here. Um, I do free 15-minute consultations. So if you're interested, um, I would be happy to chat with you. Also, if essential oils is something that you're interested in or like curious about, I love to talk about them. That's my other big passion. And I am going to be in Long Beach this weekend on Sunday at a Waves and Wellness Festival Expo. And if you're interested in learning more about that, there's a link in my bio, and then, or you can just cold DM me and we can chat. So if you are around in that area in Jersey, I would love to see your beautiful faces.
See, I wasn't sure which Long Beach you were talking about. I was thinking about California or Long Island, but no, it's good to know.
It's hard. Yeah, no, no, no. Very local. I am one for traveling, but this time it's only very, very local. But yeah, thank you so much, Roberta. This was
Oh,
so
no, this
fun.
was great. Yes. Look forward to another chapter, another
Yeah, well,
little talk. Sure.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Everybody out there, have a great holiday weekend. Thank you for joining us. and spread the word so that people will be aware of our next episode.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Wednesday. If you are in the Northeast and also dealing with this heat wave, stay cool.
At least try to. I'm getting out of
Or
my
try
apartment.
to. All right, have a good one.
You too. Take care.